Hi Jeremy, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Excellent. So good to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Whereabouts are you at the moment?
So I'm at home, which is Vancouver Island. I don't really live in a town, but the nearest town is called Qualicum Beach.
Excellent. Good stuff. Well, look, it'd be good to jump straight in, and I guess to provide context, it's always good to know where you've come from and your journey to get to where you are. So, do you want to start as far back as you want and give us a bit of an overview of kind of who you are, where you've come from, what you've done, and what you're doing now?
Sure, yeah. Well, I've always been involved in sport as a vocational pursuit. I definitely, like as a young athlete, like many young athletes, I definitely tagged on to that pro sport dream, being a professional athlete. And um, 1984 was a Summer Olympics in North America. So for me as a young kid, I would have been 10, turning 11 in the summer of 1984. And I remember it being this, it just seemed so glamorous because we didn't have a lot of TV. I wasn't able to, like, kids can access devices in their home or whatever. Like ours was like in the corner and you're only able to watch it with permission and stuff. It was a very restricted thing. So I think my parents had some good instinct. But when it came to sports, it was like unlimited. So when the Summer Olympics came on, I remember that just being my draw, and I think that moment made me just hooked on the dream. Even as I grew older and saw real realities of what life is like and what sport is like, but as a kid, I was so sold and empowered by that dream. It was inspirational and aspirational. So basically, since '84, I just pursued sport. I did hockey and BMX racing, and that was just a key part of growing up. And then I kind of had some great experiences in sport, but was not headed towards a vocation.
Hmm.
And so then I turned to coaching, and I tried hockey coaching because I was an ice hockey player and a BMX racer, and I started coaching BMX. And I really enjoyed the BMX racing, and I coached a guy that did really well and represented Canada at the Olympics in BMX racing over the years. But what I really realized early on in coaching hockey, my own sport, was that I actually just didn't necessarily want to do what I'd already done. I was drawn to new horizons, new places, and also I didn't realize it at the time, but I am influenced very heavily. I think we all are, but I'm particularly influenced by a connection with nature. And so, what I didn't realize early in life was that I was drawn to roles where I could work outside.
Mm.
And at the time, I had other reasons that I was drawn to them that I was paying attention to. But as an older person now, I realize that, like, I'm really drawn to. I was like, I don't want to work in a hockey rink for the rest of my life. That was there, but my awareness wasn't there. So I
Mm.
had other reasons that drew me to pursue other things. And this is before I had heard of anything like the National Strength Conditioning Association or anything like that, because this is early in my career. This is pre-internet. So, like, I'm not like emailing people or going to websites. Those things didn't really exist. So I basically stumbled around this identity that's like, I want to help coach athletes, not just hockey players and not just BMX racers. And so that's been what I've been doing pretty much ever since. I became a sports scientist along the way and a strength conditioning coach, and I've worked in these wonderful places, some of which I wanted to work. Like I had this audacious dream. I'm going to work at the Australian Institute of Sport by the time I'm 40. And then I remember having a dinner after working there for just a couple weeks and for my 30th birthday and thinking, geez, like that, you're really lucky. And I think that sort of describes a lot of what has happened is I set a lot of intentions that I thought would be fulfilling, and it has been that. And it has been fairly diverse in working in professional and amateur sport in these sports science, strength conditioning, and leadership roles. But I also just keep coaching in general. So I'm a professional coach as a snowboard coach. And right now, although I have Sheppard Coaching, which is a private consultancy where I work with individual athletes and teams, and I do that part time, I work for Canada Snowboard and I'm employed as a coach. And although I'm not the best snowboarder on our coaching team or the most qualified as a former athlete, I would be the least. I sort of have this role where the expression we use is there is no gap. So
Mm.
instead of saying, how do we bridge the gap between movement, mindset, medicine, and make sure it's integrated in snowboarding, my role is that the integration part. So I have a staff of movement, mindset, medicine people who are extremely clever, extremely great operators, very effective in what they do. But I travel around the world with the athletes and sort of help make sure that the integration of the habits, skills, the character behind the behaviors that are leading the process is all something that I sort of have eyes on and take a leadership role within our team for.
I mean, what a fascinating journey and background. It's quite unconventional, really, and like from humble beginnings, but you've become a sports scientist and strength and conditioning coach, extremely influential and successful. I've heard you speak and present, and have followed you and your work for decades, and then you've gone into kind of coaching a sport, and I know that through everything you've done, because of your impact and influence, you are a leader and you have been a leader, and sometimes those have been leadership roles, and sometimes that's just been who you are as a leader. So I really want to delve into that a little bit more. And can you tell me a bit about some of the key moments along your journey and your career that have really shaped you as a leader?
I would actually say probably the first thing that comes to mind would be uh, the beginnings of understanding of the importance and the power of character, and just how important it is to pursue good character, but also understand that interplay and the interdependence between how you think and what your character produces in terms of behavior, and then what you put out in the world, and then what you can be a part of and what you can create. And so there's so much out there in this world that I live in now, because every time we sort of assess where we are, we're sort of
Mm.
assessing where we are now. So we need to respect that might be different just simply because of how we thought about it.
Yeah.
So when I think about things now, I think about what the world signals to us in terms of achievement and accomplishment. And it can be very misleading because to me, sustained achievement comes from first working on character. And so with our society, a lot of the cues are on the back end, the results and outcome end. And there's almost like this acknowledgement, like nobody stands up in a leadership summit or conference or anything and says, I disagree, character's not important. Everyone accepts that it's important, but we don't really fundamentally tend to discuss how it fits in and how it causes other things to happen and how it's essentially a keystone habit. And as a kid, I have received the good fortune of being able to see two contrasting examples, with one childhood influence being someone who was overtly a leader, but
Mhm.
secretly struggled with secrets, and character issues, truthfulness, and ethics. And then another influence who was someone who, what I would describe as having really strong character. That was my dad, but not overtly a leader, not a leader out in the world, not seen as a leader from his work per se, but seen as a leader within his community, seen as a caretaker of others, someone who, before making a decision, would consider, well, what decision would I make if I made the decision based on my values?
Mm.
And that's how he thought. And he will tell me this. He's 91 years old, and he'll tell me this if I mention this to him on the weekend at Little League Baseball when he's watching Jake play a tournament this weekend. He'll say that he never said that way
Yeah.
because he doesn't have the education, and he's a very self-deprecating, humble person. When you're
Hmm.
born in the Great Depression, right, and you come up
Yeah.
without things, like it would have been the same no matter sort of where he grew up in that era. But there's this humility that comes with it, and he doesn't see himself as that leader. But it was a strong influence on me because our discussions led me to create those understandings even as a youngster.
Mm.
So as I sort of grew up into a teenager and then eventually actually start to think deliberately about leadership, that imprint came with me. And I'm so grateful for that imprint. It's also helped me play emotional self-defense about the negative imprint too, right?
Sure.
Because you've got the
Yeah.
other side of it where you're like, there's secrets and there's ethic issue, and there's this other example which could be seen as something that's really quite unpleasant. But if I look back and I think about like that contrast really helped set a foundation for like character is represented by your behaviors. So when you
Yeah.
make decisions, make them based on values. What decision would you make based on values? And then now I find it very easy to not worry about making correct decisions individually or as a leader. I just worry my ass off about making decisions correctly. Just pedantic about like, are we making the decision correctly? Okay, if we're making it with good principles as a team, the way we communicate with our values first, with beneficence for everyone that is involved, all the key stakeholders, we can't go wrong.
Yeah.
We might not make all the best decisions, but we will overall do our best. We will ultimately reach our potential.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that. It's so good to hear. And I've actually got a course on leadership, and one of the sections is on character, and it's right at the start and the importance of character. And I use this illustration of the iceberg that, you can only see like 10% above the surface, but it's the 90% below the surface that keeps it afloat. And, you've got to have some 90% of good stuff below the surface that's going to keep you afloat, because if you're rotten to the core, then you can't exude those behaviors that that we want to see. And so it's so good that you've had such a good example of somebody who lives according to their values and wants to be authentic, and you want to do that too, and that's great to hear. I kind of want to go a little bit further, and so obviously you've had a good role model in your father. You've seen what you don't want in some bad examples of kind of leadership. So with that as a kind of foundation, what other kind of experiences, maybe in sports, have you had as a leader, or experiences in leadership positions that have continued to shape and mold you?
Yeah. So that's a great question, and I would like to first mention the transition period and the realization before we really talk about leadership. And I
Mm.
believe that most of the listeners are going to come into this experience thinking that we're just going to talk about influencing others, which is essentially fundamental to any definition of leadership. There's that
Yeah.
involvement, but I want to talk about first personal leadership, because something profound for me was my transition from being a sports person to being a sports professional. And that really influenced me in a way where I'm really grateful for this period, but I entered a period of this sort of unknown, this uncomfortable period, but it wasn't unpleasant. Like it wasn't like, oh my gosh, like sport's been taken away and I'm like depressive. It wasn't depressive states. It was more like this has come to an end. It's been coming to an end. And the realization, not that it's like the dream, that original dream, like my pro sports dream, like I wasn't close. Like it's not like I was like my friend Matt who works in Los Angeles. He'll often talk about, oh yeah, I was drafted by in the NHL, but like I never made it or whatever. And I'm like, I always joke with him and say, dude, I wasn't even at that close. Like you look at it
Yeah.
as like you didn't make it. I would have loved to have been that close. I'd tell people that I made it, you know? So, he played great hockey and played major junior and like super credible and literally legit. So I didn't have like the rug swept underneath me from a
Mm.
pro sports dream or a contract taken away. So it wasn't this like depressive state, but it was the realization that I didn't have an additional identity.
Mm.
I had a singular athletic identity. So
Right.
as a 20-year-old man, like I literally remember thinking to myself, dude, you don't know how to meet women because you've relied on having an athletic identity, which puts you in the proximity of the opposite sex at times, and then you have reasonable social skills in that context. So take you out of that context, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm shy? What? I'm not shy, but then I don't have the confidence structures, right? So like not that this is occurring in high school, but like the 15, 16-year-old equivalent would be without the jacket with the letter on it, how do you meet the girls? How do you
Yeah.
make friends? So it's like I philosophically, or I guess fundamentally, needed this status of a jacket. And then so like I needed to own that I I like music and I like sports. And I hadn't really developed as a person out of that. So then all of a sudden there's this wonderful time period where I realized that you still need to live life on purpose. So
Mm.
then I began to understand that if I change my intention and if I change where I'm going, I'm going to need personal leadership structures. Before you lead others, this is the main thing I wanted to say about this is I realized then, not that I solved the problem, but around 2021 when I was going through this, athlete transition from sports person to sports professional, I realized that it was going to be extremely important to work on personal leadership skills,
Yeah.
personal leadership awareness, self concept, like to develop a self concept that's authentic, because you're not a hockey player anymore. You can still play hockey, but that's not where you're going as a vocation. You're not going to be a professional BMX racer, but at the time I was like, if you can't do it, be around it, coach, and so I put my purpose towards that and then began developing myself. So I was really attacking personal leadership fairly early, and reading everything from Stephen Covey to the guys on, late night infomercials and all the different sort of techniques and tactics and working on that realization that it all needed to be based, any technique and tactic needed to be based on, again, coming back to like fundamental character. So it's quite reinforcing to have that early lesson about character and then that athlete transition lesson about personal leadership. And then as my career progressed, that we've discussed some of those different opportunities, then you start to see where you're like, oh, I I have curiosity about management. So
Right.
could I be someone who could manage this part of what's going on better? And I realized early on that there was a difference between management and leadership, and
Yeah.
that perhaps the journey was first to learn to manage yourself and lead yourself. Then you can learn to manage something that involved people. And then a natural progression, if you feel like you have the affinity, is to begin to lead, which is to consider not just how we're going to do things, but what we're going to do. and our identity as a team, and what's the breadth of the strengths, and how do we align them towards our shared priorities. So there's this sort of not linear, but there is this progression from like you take care of your own situation, you take care of your own principles, your own values, your own fundamentals, and when that seems to be strong and something you can rely on, then that allows you to develop your individual leadership skills, and then through seeing like, oh, I can manage a small group of people on a small task, or I can manage, and that could be like 4 or 5 other strength conditioning coaches. Or it could be there's 4 or 5 people where we comprise a sport performance team for this Olympic team. And that role is to manage that aspect, and then eventually you work into like director type roles, which involve that broader strategy, which is much more about breadth and doing the correct things, being leadership, doing things correctly, being effective management.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, often when I speak to people, they jump straight towards kind of the function of leadership and the output side, and they don't really talk about the character that you've started with, and the associated behaviors, and then really understanding yourself first and getting your own ducks in line, if you like, really understanding self-leadership, personal leadership first before leading others, and that the importance of that, it can't be, said enough. It's so crucial that we spend that time understanding ourselves, or it's difficult to really understand other people. I guess in your journey then, and in your roles as a leader, have you then spent time developing other people, which I'm sure you have, like your staff, your S&C coaches who are below you? How have you kind of mentored these guys and guided them? Have you got any examples of how you've really set an example, or really helped people develop themselves?
Well, some wins and losses for sure. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I look back and all of the things that I've played with turned to gold, But like I said earlier, if you focus on doing things correctly, you get kind of more desirable outcomes, right? So, in an effort to sort of figure this out, I realized early on, Pete, that when it came to personal development, it's really hit and miss for me being an effective like if you're to talk to people 20 years later and ask them like where were your influences, it's really hit and miss if I'm involved in someone earlier in their career.
Yeah.
And I because here's the example that I would give is as a manager I'm okay, right? I'm much more inspired as a leader. Like, what are the correct things to do? What is our collective value? How do we get, like, I'm much better at putting the right people into the room. And I
Yeah.
feel like I have a unique way of seeing the interconnectedness, and that's a strength. But then when it comes to sitting with an early career practitioner and doing a lot of management and helping them with that personal leadership side of things, where they're doing a lot of management and I'm sort of setting expectations and exploring, where they should go. Um, I think I'm just surrounded by people who are stronger at that. So an example would be, I joined a large institute as a
Mhm.
director, and there were, folks like, 3 or 4 in particular practitioners that were in, what I would call senior roles there. And I asked them to take a heavy-handed role in the early career practitioners because I wanted them to, first of all, if I come in as a leader and I throw shade over all the other potential leaders, not much grows in the shade, right?
Yeah.
Mushrooms grow with manure and shade.
Yeah. And you've got
Human
to
beings
empower.
don't do too well if you heap shit on them and keep them in the shade.
Yeah.
So to have other leaders, you have to give them something to lead, right? So leading others, leading processes, leading programs was really critical, but also it made good division of attention because coming up with those detailed PD plans or those detailed personal development plans, like I think that's essential to do myself. And so I actually find it very difficult to go back and do that for someone else because my
Mm.
process was to learn how to do that myself through self-directed study.
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by people who know how to do that with early career folks. Where I believe I've played more of a direct involvement is kind of understanding that that needs to happen and then having the willingness to say, I'm not the best person. Whereas developing leaders midway through their career and developing other leaders where they are bringing a lot of energy themselves and have a stronger sense of their self identity as well as where they want to go. And they also have certainly less than what we would call a naive sense of
Hmm.
where they can go. So they have a realistic sense of where they can contribute. So that suggests someone that's been around in that environment for at least a couple years and has fundamental education that they've then applied. Because when you leave school and you go out there and you realize that how you've learned it is how you learn things, but then how you apply it is not exactly the same. And so there's
Yeah.
seasons where you got to figure this stuff out, figure out where it fits. You can be correct, but it's not the correct time. How do you figure that out? That just takes time. So those mid-career folks that are looking to develop, looking to go to the high performance level, as a mentor, I tend to be able to lean in there. And I also have a leadership style where I end up getting people to tell me what we're going to do. And early in the career, that's usually not the relationship you strike up with someone who doesn't have that level of autonomy within the organization yet.
Mm.
So I tend to work more directly with people who have a ton of autonomy.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to hear because, you're talking when you were talking about allowing other people to manage, that's great that you're not trying to micromanage everyone, you're kind of empowering people as leaders to get on and lead the younger practitioners. And you're also giving people a pretty long rope to develop themselves and have autonomy and not just kind of control. And I love that because that's a really great style of leadership. It's not this kind of controlling micromanagement, but it's this releasing, empowering, leading by example, and so on. So great to hear that. I guess I want to go into maybe some of your inspirations. You mentioned in your early years you read a lot of books and really went deep into kind of your self development. Are there any kind of models or frameworks that you've adopted, or maybe some like the odd rule of thumb that you've developed yourself, or something? Any ideas or any thoughts that you can share with us on models or frameworks of leadership that you like, or maybe some strong influences and inspirations you've had other than the ones you mentioned earlier?
Certainly. So I would love to chat about the model of leadership that we use that
Hmm.
is unique because I would love to share it with people. Um, and I guess before I get into it though is it is not something that like I woke up in the morning and just had this epiphany. So I don't want to claim that it isn't influenced by so many other people, but I really don't know if my brain is even conscious of all the influences. So I guess I just want to say, and I don't want to just sound humble. I feel humble about this. I have a name for it. We have all these different sayings. They change all the time. It like I love it. It works for me. But yeah, I feel like as I explain it, you'll hear elements that are like, did he read the book Team of Teams? Darn straights I did, but I didn't copy. You know what I mean? Like it's all
Yeah.
influenced. I read a ton of everything from like Brad Stulberg to I did a minor in organizational psychology back when people still used typewriters, man. So I wrote essays on organizational culture and psychology. So I'm influenced from good and bad in the childhood to everything. So I'll try my best to sort of see where I've grafted something directly from someone because I don't want to disrespect anyone and take
Sure.
anyone's intellectual property.
Yeah,
So
no, I
yeah,
understand that. I mean,
all that.
we're all the same, you know. I read widely and take ideas from different places, and like you don't always know if it's something you've heard or seen, or if it's a unique idea of your own, and it all kind of mixes together. But yeah, go for it. I'm excited to hear.
Yeah, so working with a team that I've involved in would be characterized as a non-hierarchical leadership structure. And I just, for me, like I get, honestly, it's almost like a, as the kids say these days, I get triggered by hierarchy in all of its forms. Like there can be a dispute across the street and I might see hierarchy and like I notice it. It's crazy how much I notice it. And perhaps I feed this awareness because like I think about history and I listen to podcasts on history and I'm like, there's another hierarchical tyrant gone crazy and that explains this terrible thing that happened 50, 100, 75 years ago, whatever. So I'm very like much into this sort of I'm influenced by how small teams do amazing things and perform outside of their resourcing. So I'm drawn to these structures of like it's not anarchy when you don't have this super rigid structured model, but the Industrial Revolution brought us this top-down structure where the independent parts could actually be independent because in the Industrial Revolution, manufacturing, influence, you don't necessarily need the team to make a lot of decisions together. You can have a superstructure that makes those decisions. But we work with people who are way too smart, that have way too many skills to have them actually do independent work. Their work is interdependent. So what we do, which is a bunch of stuff that I've just taken from all over the place. So there's the philosophy called holacracy, which I love, but haven't absorbed there. Like that's a leadership principle. You can get credentialed in it and you can apply it en masse. I've sort of read the books and taken what I like. And essentially what we have you could describe as a dynamic heterarchy where the leadership structure and where the leadership is being looked to there's an immediate effect, there's an immediacy to followership and leadership. So like you can be in a conversation and make a statement and you could be observing not knowing what people's roles are and you could say it appears as though Christy is the leader and 10 seconds later you might say it appears as though Michaela is the leader. And that's not a problem. It's that Christy's point is leadership and we are looking to her as followers because within our process of the discussion, which will lead to some decisions that we make, she is the leader in that moment and we look to her for that. And then when Michaela speaks up, we are looking to her in that moment. It's not, well, it's Christy's job to convince Michaela final decision maker. I realize that in some contexts you need gatekeepers. And we have
Sure.
certain elements of gatekeeping, but we don't say stay in your lane. Because I was a BMX racer, so I competed against people in the lane beside me. That Argentinian with the big elbows and the Chilean with the other big elbows on in lane 2 and 3. I want them out of the race by turn 1, right? So don't say stay in your lane and then say this is our team, but stay in your lane. I'm seeking something much, much different. I'm seeking something that seems like the best qualities of a family as well as the best qualities of a team. So if you were to accuse me of being a leader in this team, I'm a captain in the dressing room. That's how I like to lead. Not some distanced back office person who does stuff elsewhere under a different set of priorities and a different set of leaderships. Like I look at it as the type of leadership I like to do is captain in the dressing room. And if you think about the best captain you've been or
Yeah.
have been around or seen, did they tell people what to do? Did they tell talented people what to do? I don't think so. None of my captain reference points and role models are like that. So I very much like this integration of heterarchy, holacracy, a team of teams style approach, having a unique identity, very much aligned, like what is our character, which is represented by our behaviors, because our character will fuel our process, and our process will be evidenced by our outputs. Great
Yeah.
book written just on outputs. Dr. Ben Sporer, great physiologist. So our process produces things. And those are our reference points, our new skills, our new abilities, and those are our outputs. And then we have our results and our outcomes. And so another characteristics, Pete, of the teams of athletes that I work with, but
Hmm.
also and lead, but also the coaches in our team, is my role is sometimes I'm captain, sometimes Elliot's captain, sometimes Christy's captain, and who cares what an organization puts us in an org chart? We don't even look at the org chart, and the people that make the org chart know this. It's all good. We have an influence chart. We don't have an org chart. It's circles. Everything's a circle, and the circle just gets bigger. So Aubrey and Hannah comprise our fuel team, but they need Michaela, our chief medical officer, to make some decisions. That's a circle. I got two ladies in the fuel team, the two qualified ladies. We're followers when they're leading. They're a circle. They join a new circle when Michaela needs to involve. We draw another circle when Sven needs to be involved. When it's a athlete rehab, we draw a circle that involves, this, that, and other things, so that your mental health, your mental performance, your technical, your tactical, your strength, your neuromuscular, your injury rehabilitation, all of these things can contribute to a holistic athlete development if you have circles. If you have a hierarchy, then the value of someone is gatekept by someone's ability to integrate them. So if you say that we're just going to change right now and tomorrow morning, starting August 1st, we're now a hierarchical structure, the value of everyone, and I only mention 1/3 of the names of the wonderful people that I work with every day, but all of their values gets reduced and defined by exactly the amount of value that I can understand.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've said this team will be only as good as Jeremy Sheppard's ability. That's a terrible idea. Why would you have so many wonderful skill sets if it is up to another person who doesn't know them as well as they know themselves, and doesn't know how to apply their craft as well as someone else? Now, if those people that are non-snowboarding people, they propose ideas to me all the time, and I say, here's where that might be more effective because of I'm filtering it through how it fits into the yearly training plan. Or I'm filtering it with the responsibility that my leadership role comes with, to think about this 8-year progression, or to think about this year compared to next. Whereas that's not necessarily the thing that they're supposed to be obsessed with. I'm supposed to be obsessed with it. So again, that doesn't show up as hierarchy. That's like, oh, we make these decisions together, so that's what I'm just supposed to do, not subordinate your idea. I'm supposed to help apply it, not decide on its value ultimately.
Sure. What's fascinating about what you're saying is it this kind of model and style requires a whole lot of trust. It requires a lot of respect for people's abilities and skills and expertise. It requires a load of authenticity. It requires lots of humility. It requires you to not be threatened by other people, but to understand that you can't be the best at everything and that some people are better than you. So it kind of requires everything that we want in an organization, yet people kind of want all that in a context that doesn't always facilitate those values of trust and authenticity and respect and so on. So I really like what you're describing because it kind of requires all the values that are really close to my heart and that I believe are essential for genuine success and long-term success and enjoyment along the way. You know, like what I don't like about a lot of areas of elite sport is it's kind of, you know, win at all costs. It doesn't matter if you burn yourself out. It doesn't matter if you're not having a good time. It's just about the output. But what I love about this is like it leaves space for enjoying the journey.
And I must admit, like with all humility, I have strong feelings about the fit for this. Like when as we're talking, I said to you, the teams that I work in, and what I mean is I will join another team and not be a leader. I do that all the time. I did that last week as a consultant. I was not the leader, but I was not consulting an organization where they are very hierarchical. So
Right.
I literally am like, this is like, I choose to not do this. I don't do this thing where I enter a hierarchy where this stuff has to happen. Having said that, so I feel strongly, I also don't feel like the reason why I'm not telling everyone you're an idiot for not doing it this way because it feels so incredible and talk to some of the people that are in the team or whatever, like this probably wouldn't work for Walmart, right? Like this probably wouldn't work in every environment, but let's look at like think of the different environments you're in and now let's look at the human resources that I'm talking about. So when I'm talking about my day job, my main job, my coaching job in snowboarding, I work with a very, very, very successful team. So our the winning record, particularly on our men's side, has been deep and extremely strong. And on our women's side, it's strong. We don't have the athlete numbers and depth, but honestly, like no, like action sports, female participation is unfortunately like not nearly as high, and it's
Mm.
super real. So, our program's been successful. So that isn't me. That's the athletes taking the risks, the athletes doing the work, and the athletes getting those results. So when you're leading athletes who are already successful, remember there is a tremendous psychological security in getting them. They're more willing, able, and ready to work with coaches like us who almost never talk about winning, but are obsessed with accountability. So
Mm.
we're like, you go to practice, we never talk about winning, but we are talking about the process and the character that drives the process of what it takes to win. And if you're not doing the process, we're holding you accountable. You lose, we're lifting you up. The team wins a lot. These kids are winning. Like I'm blessed. They're winning all the time. So it's sort of like if you're the All Blacks, you kind of get to experiment with your philosophies around winning because you're mostly winning all the time. So
Yeah.
I admit, like somebody could be listening to this saying, "Oh yeah, for sure. Like you don't talk about winning, you talk about character. It sounds good. It sounds like you guys have campfires and hold hands." Sometimes we do have campfires and we shake hands a lot and we hug a lot. It's we dap each other up. It's very professional as much as it's professional in that sport. But these athletes are in a risk aesthetic sport.
Yeah.
Autonomy, mastery, belonging. Those are the three things that human beings need. But for them to be successful, autonomy and mastery of their autonomy is
Yeah.
really important. The back end, the support, there's tons of belonging because action sport communities are real communities. It hasn't always been the most accepting community. I often think of the punk rock community, not an accepting community, a rejecting community, a judgmental community. But the punk rock community we know today is a very accepting community. In action sports industries, skate parks, whatever, it's an all comers. It's a very generally accepting community compared to many. So how you go about being autonomous is actually rewarded within the culture. And so that affects how we lead those athletes. But now if we look at the team behind that team, 70% of the team outside of technical coaching are women. Our average age is in the 40s. That's very different. That's very different. If you were to look at an Olympic team, there'd be much many, generally speaking, especially in action sports where it's male dominated performers, we have there's about 7 times as many, say, by the age of 17, there's 7 times as many men snowboarding as there are women. So we're very, very extreme on that end. So that tends to characteristic the support team and the coaches and stuff like that. But for us, we've not on purpose gone out and created this cultural age and sex diversity. What we have is that just kind of naturally built up because those folks are going to be more successful in a higher autonomy environment. And so we as a team get belonging through having higher autonomy for those professionals. And the other thing, Pete, that I'll just admit, and it's not naughty for me to say, it's not like, ooh, I can't say this, but on one side of my career, the main side being snowboard, that's a government funded thing. And so that's coming from like Olympic funding. And we don't do really well. We want to do well as a nation, and we're asked to do well. Some might even say pressured or expected to do well. But there's a huge gap. The expectation is here by Canadians watching us, but also Canadians giving us money, but the resources are here. And this is very real, and I'll tell anyone, the Prime Minister, anyone, this is the gap. High expectations, low resources. And so what you do with that gap, the only tool I have is creativity.
I love
So
it. That's
how do I have Chris? How do I have Christy? How do I have Hannah? How do I have Aubrey? How do I have Michaela? Why is Gian working with us? Why does Shandia work with us? Why does Therese work with us? Why does Jerry Ramagita, who works for in the NHL, I've got these colleagues that want to work with us. And the only reason, the reason to stay and work with us is not money. I don't even think I've removed it as a reason to leave, which is my ambition, is to just pay them enough that it's not a reason to leave. And the reason to stay is because autonomy, mastery, and belonging. They have a free runway to be the best medical professional, a free runway to be the best physiotherapist for mountain sport athletes, and they get to be successful within our organization. And I'm not only trying to help them be successful out of it and hoping for that, I'm actually taking action to create things outside of it, because I know that this gap means that I maybe have to remunerate them in some non-financial way by paying opportunity or introductions or professional development or just, something here. Like one of our practitioners, she makes enough money from us to pay for the expenses of owning her dog. We pay for her dog to stay alive. And that hits her right here. But what we get from her is she helps turn silver into gold with what she helps our athletes with her expertise, that I can't replace her. But she's paid with some Canadian pesos enough money to take care of her dog. So I got to deliver on her freedoms, on her opportunities, and she loves to snowboard. So that's just my leverage, right? That's my opportunity. So that's kind of like my statement is the way we do it isn't for everyone, right? If you have
Yeah.
more resources, you maybe don't want to do it the way I'm doing it. If your athletes make $15 million a year and have 3 agents that you have to get permission from doing stuff from, you might not have the same relationships as I do with athletes. You might have time periods where you're not allowed to call them or not supposed to call them. I have athletes who will call me if they want me to pick them up from prison, like they've spent the night overnight in prison, or like they've had something really bad happen with their life. So like in terms of like we're dealing with different boundaries and different relationships. So it's definitely something that is very context specific.
Sure. Absolutely fascinating. I mean, it's been really good chatting with you and listening to you. I was going to kind of, one of my questions was, talk about your style of leadership and this kind of thing, but you kind of covered it all, and it's just been so refreshing to hear something different, and hopefully, I'm sure our listeners will have really appreciated you being so open and sharing, your style and some of your experiences. I guess just to close out, have you got any kind of final reflections or anything that you might want to throw out there to maybe some of our younger practitioners that are listening, words of advice or any closing remarks around the whole leadership side?
Sure. I mean, we talked about personal leadership and team leadership, and we talked about like our enjoyment and fulfillment as a worthwhile consideration. If we're going to work our whole life, it's not naughty to seek a job that you really love, right? And so for me, a fundamental difference earlier in my life was just coming to the understanding that if I define success based on the signals that are coming into my life, then I'm going to define success in a manner that I now find to be trivial. And
Yeah.
honestly, like, I guess I've trained my brain to look at them with like a repulsiveness, and inauthenticity. So literally results and outcomes, they kind of gross me out when people talk about winning too much. Because I've been around all these winners who don't talk about winning so much. And so the thing I would leave with you is a fundamental aspect is changing the way you define success. So if success is when your behaviors match your values, when you're unsuccessful, it is simply a calibration issue. It's like I chose to do a behavior, whether I lost my mind for a moment or not. You can own that. I was not aware, I was not present, and therefore I made a mindless decision. I mean, I spoke to my wife yesterday and probably said five mindless things throughout the day. It happens all the time, right? Like when we're not in the moment, we're not ourselves. But if we're in the moment and we say, well, success is going to be defined by my behavior matching my values, you can do something wrong and you're still right. You're still on the right path. You're still correct. You're still successful. And so you can lose and be successful because of the way you behaved. And I firmly believe that eventually my 12-year-old son will understand that he can lose a baseball game and be successful, and then he can win a baseball game and not even get a hit and still be individually successful, right? Because his contributions can be measured in other ways based on how he approached the game, how he prepared for the game. And it's just the same thing with life. Winning and losing is going to happen, and different opportunities are going to happen for different people, right? Like if you look at it like, well, that person got this easier than me, you have no idea what harder thing they had to go get, right? So
Yeah.
that kind of comparison is just, it's not helpful. It's truthful, it's real, it matters, but then how long do you want to carry that with you? It gets heavier over time. Just don't put it in the backpack, just hike on, focused on behaviors that are in line with your values, and you can't not be a successful person in life.
That's a great place to finish and to wrap up. I've genuinely enjoyed chatting with you and listening to you. It's been a lesson in philosophy, if anything, but it's just been so interesting. So thank you so much, Jeremy, for your time. Thank you for your openness and for sharing with us. I really appreciate it. And like I said earlier, I've kind of observed you over the years and your career and followed you and learnt so much, and it's been another real learning moment for me. So thank you, and all the best as you move on.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, we got an Olympics in February, so we're just in that lead up. We go to Australia soon for training, and yeah, this is going to be my ninth Olympics helping
Wow.
athletes towards because I've had that good fortune of working in summer sports as a
Mm.
sports scientist and strength and conditioning coach. I'm just fascinated that I'm still excited, maybe more excited than previous ones. It's super bizarre. I feel really lucky. I'm not jaded around the coaching piece. I just love it. So, yeah.
Great to see so much enthusiasm. Well, all the best with the Olympics, and hope it all goes well.
Thanks, Pete. I really appreciate your time and thanks for shining a light on some of the struggles and sort of philosophies we've come up with as a team. So, thanks for shining a light on the team I have.
No worries. Great to chat to you. Take care. Bye
Take care.
bye.